Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Fundamentalists podcast. My name is Elliott Morgan, and I'm here once again with my good friend, Dr. Peter Rollins. Peter, how are you doing today?
I'm doing well. As you can see, there's a big Christmas tree behind me. I'm feeling very Christmassy. So
Yeah, you
that's
got the
good.
you have that really cool TV that looks like art when you turn it off, and you can flip
Yeah.
it so it's vertical, and it's so cool. And we've been looking at those TVs as like a our couple like gift to ourselves, but I don't think it would look as cool in our place because it's right up against that brick fireplace. I don't think it would work, but that looks so good.
Listen, I am a big advocate for this because it just when you turn it off, it looks like a poster, and I love the vertical. So if
Yeah.
you're not watching on video, basically I've got a die-hard Christmas image on the screen. But yeah,
Yes.
no, it's brilliant. It's art because I don't watch much TV. It's sitting off. I hate what a TV looks like because it's just this black
Yep.
box. So it doubles it as art. Very, very cool.
So
But
cool. And the Christmas
you do
trees.
want it, you do want it to turn. But if you
Yeah.
and yeah, I don't know if
I
you
want it to turn, and I don't want the wires popping down. I don't
I
like the
know,
wire game. That's
I
and
know.
I've yet to find a way to get that to. You don't have wires popping down, but you got that
No,
goes
I
in there. It
do have
doesn't.
wires, and you're hitting on a very sensitive
Oh, I see. I'm
topic
sorry.
here. But you know
I know
what? The
it's
great thing
tough.
about the TV, I know, but the great thing about the TV is its main brain is separate, so that's hidden down. So there's only one very small wire, and it's transparent. So I kind of have it
Cool.
covered by through, so you can kind of hide it a little bit. But I get, yeah,
Okay.
it annoys me every time I see it.
That's actually a really good. You kind of because we I think landed on getting a Roomba instead of the TV, but you're kind of selling me with the one wire because that
One
okay.
wire, transparent, very thin,
Yeah,
one wire. You can probably just have it nicely,
yeah.
neatly going down the side. Yep.
Well, thank you for informing that. And I
That's our
hope all of our
sponsorship,
listeners.
sponsored
Yep,
by Samsung Frame.
yep. That's what it's called, Samsung frame, folks, and beautiful Christmas tree as well, Pete. And do you like my background? I have the lights again, so I look a little cute streamer. I look
It's
like
very
somebody who plays video
un-Christmassy.
games.
You
It
do you
is. Let
do
me
look
make
like
it
a Twitcher.
Christmassy.
Oh, can
Yeah,
you
that's
do
what my
that?
goal is. I bet I can turn it on to something that's a little bit more. Let's see here,
Christmassy.
folks. This is Jolly. There we go. How's that?
Oh yeah, I can see why they called it Jolly. That's impressive. Are you Christmassy in the main house?
We're
Okay.
probably Christmassier than we've ever been.
Wow.
At least more so than Grace has normally been. And we had a tree. We got
Polystyrene on the ground for snow
yes, we
everywhere.
got the
That's what
whole
I'm hoping.
place. Bubble machines and snow machines. It's disgusting.
Yeah.
We have boxes everywhere. I have like Christmas tree. We have a real wreath that we bought from a child that was going door to door, which was pretty wholesome and fun. And Goose tried to kill the kid multiple
Oh.
times. And then we have Grace has this like she got this decoration where I have to like climb up in our tree and like hang it, and it's supposed to look like Santa climbing up a ladder. But I don't really like I don't like it, but I'll hang it up this weekend, I guess, because she
And
keeps
Goose is
going like,
still
why
alive.
haven't you? Yeah, man, she
Oh,
is speaking of alchemy. She has got the philosopher's stone and the elixir of life because she will live forever. She has figured it
wow.
out.
Wow.
She came into bed this morning, and I was looking at her and I was like, she's just still so healthy. So disappointing, but
Don't let
one
Grace
day.
hear you say that. You still
Oh
have to
yeah, she
pretend you
knows.
like the dog, don't you?
I told you about yeah, no, when the veterinarian came out and said in the lobby and with me and Grace that her blood work looked good, and I just went, "Oh, it's devastating news." Everyone in the in the lobby laughed. The veterinarian thought it was funny too, but it was a good time. Like, oh
Yeah.
gosh, she's so healthy. Anyway, I love that dog. So Pete,
I remember, honestly,
let's
I remember when you were dating Grace and you didn't necessarily have a love for that dog, and you had to
hate.
kind of pretend you had a love for that dog.
Yes, I did, and because the first time I met Goose, it was Grace being like, "Well, whatever you do, don't touch her and don't look at her. And if she comes up to you, just let her do whatever you want, whatever she wants. And then also don't make kissy noises and don't, make any sudden movement. Basically anything you would do with a dog, don't do.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh man, this is going to be, surely this dog's old, and nope, she's just going to live forever. But anyway,
Mm.
we're one big happy family now. I love that dog. It's fine. Are you going to get a dog soon? Is it time?
I don't think I'm that settled yet. Too young, you know.
Yeah, good point. Good point. You're not like me yet.
Yeah.
When you get up to my age. So, Pete, what do you know about alchemy? What is your take on it? What is the extent of your knowledge? Because I guarantee you, it's not much less than my own.
Okay, because this is for everybody. This is Elliott's uh, subject matter, and I'm guessing we will get into Jung because Jung obviously he liked that metaphor of alchemy. But if we're
Yes.
talking about the history of it, the only stuff I know virtually nothing. I know that it is the precursor to chemistry, I guess,
Yes.
changing base metals into precious metals, and
Yes.
it's kind of connected with esoteric thinking and
Yes.
connected with the Philosopher's Stone. And
Yes.
yeah, so I'm basically, well, and I could talk probably more about the Jungian stuff, but that's the stuff I know about alchemy as a pre-science. So can
Nice.
you fill me in with anything else?
I think that is an excellent start, Pete. In fact,
Mhm.
that kind of covers some of the notes that I had. It is known as a proto chemistry. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to dive in a little bit here, Pete, to the history of alchemy. And
Oh,
the reason for that is because A, I find the history really interesting, and
and
B, I
two,
find
you
a
think
little.
we've got two, you've got too many viewers. You want to get rid of some of the
Exactly.
listeners. Yep.
Exactly. Yeah. We're gonna go ahead and we're gonna go all the way back to the Babylonian era, folks. Get tucked in. You don't even have to listen. Just listen to the melodic tones of our voices, because that's
Yeah.
about what you're gonna get from listening to anything involving alchemy, because it's so confusing.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's proto chemistry, and my so I go back and forth on alchemy. Now, what I also find interesting about it, I like the history of it. I find the Jungian side of it like interesting, but I still don't get what Jung got. Like Jung became obsessed with alchemy around the 1920s and really went with it, and was like someone gave him a book on alchemy. He let it sit on his bookshelf for years. He thought that is gibberish. I don't want anything to do with that. Actually, the word gibberish, some say, comes from a guy who was an alchemist, a medieval alchemist, um, and showing that even then people thought that alchemy was basically just a bunch of gibberish. And so Jung eventually discovers that, oh, he can look at this in a symbolic way or a metaphorical way, and it can act as an antecedent to his idea of individuation. But alchemy before that came and went multiple times, Pete. Guess how far back it goes? This is fun. This is like a game show.
Ooh, it goes back to the 16th century.
Very nice. It goes back to 200 BC. Can you even believe it?
Oh, wow.
Some.
Yeah, that's far back.
We'll be
That's
right
pretty
back, folks.
far right. I'm pretty far right there.
Yeah, and so the alchemists made things deliberately confusing. As some folks believe it was began with metallurgy, and then Marie Louis von Franz, a very famous post-Jungian, I believe what's referred to as the first generation of Jungians. Um, she said that it's been around for about 2,200 years, 200 BC, and that it might have been connected to mummification. So no one knows where it began. It may have began in Egypt. It may have began in China, or it may have popped up at the same time in both places, or they communicated with each other because around that time there was trade. But mummification was one example of the first kind of material and spiritual things being put together. Like you were going to take, if you made the right physical compound, you could mummify your body and you could last into the afterlife. And so they gave
Uh,
mummies to, they mummified the wealthy and the royalty, and then the poor people got little toy mummies.
yeah, they weren't left out.
They weren't left out.
You know,
What's going
that's
on
very
with my
interesting.
view? I like touched
Oh,
by an angel right here.
you are. Look at that. That is quite beautiful. If you're watching a
It's
video,
lovely.
as you talk about the spiritual dimension of
Yeah,
alchemy, you just
and
suddenly became like a Renaissance painting.
it's angelic. Yeah, wow. This is
Yeah.
the. I hope I can recreate this sometime.
Actually, I think it's
Um,
a really cheesy one of those Christian pieces of art is what it looks
yes,
like. Yeah.
Thomas Kincaid or something.
Yeah, that's the guy
Uh,
I was thinking of.
his
Here
images
on
are
that,
not alchemical.
that I didn't know. That's interesting that mummification was was a kind of like mixing of the material and the spiritual. And you wrap the person up in this ritualistic way, and it has a transformative effect on their afterlife. Is that what you're? Yeah, that's
Yes,
interesting.
it
Yeah.
allows them to live forever. And it is yeah, it is kind of it's in also you have to remember this all predates science. So like you're saying, this is a proto-chemistry type thing. So they didn't know. For them, matter, the way we think of matter is not the way we think of matter today. Matter was still imbibed with like spirit. So there was no real distinction between the two.
Mm. Which, I mean, as a precursor, because like philosophy was a kind of precursor to science, where early Greek philosophers and the pre-Greeks would do things like, talk about everything is made of kind of water, everything is made of uh,
Water,
ice,
air,
air.
oh
Yeah.
yeah. The
And
humors, is that what you're talking about? That stuff?
the humors, well, is that
Was that later?
that might be later, but yeah, but is it Thales? Thales was the kind of one who noticed that water changes form. If it's cold, it's solid. If it's at room
Yeah.
temperature, it's liquid. If you heat it up, it's steam. And he's like, oh, this one thing can take various shapes and forms. And so already they're talking about kind of that everything at base is one substance. And, then you have modern science, which gets into atomic and then subatomic particles,
Yeah.
and everything is made up of energy. So, there's always an element of truth in these proto sciences. That's why I think they lead to sciences. You know,
Yeah.
the idea that matter is infused with something not material is,
Yeah.
there's some interesting thought there.
Um, thinking about like I was thinking about in the 90s and 80s like how easy it was to get on sitcoms, and I also think about how easy it would have been to be a scientist when they were first coming up with science, because you could just be like looking at water and be like look at this, whoa, and people would be like, oh my gosh, I haven't even never even looked at that before. And now there's like everyone, science has figured a lot of stuff out, but man, you could
Yeah.
have really made it been a I could have been a genius
Yes.
back in the day, Pete. Like I could have murdered it, and I could have been on a TGIF sitcom.
Well,
Anyway,
we got in when it was easy to start a podcast. I think
that's true.
probably now it's a bit hard to kind of make a wave. So
That's true. We
yeah.
have our tiny little wave that we're still surfing. So thanks, folks.
Hmm.
Um, and why wouldn't you when you're getting all this incredible knowledge? So also, the alchemy continued to spread using through war. So there was the wars of Alexander the Great, and then came the Hellenistic age. That's when the Greeks moved into the Middle East after the death of Alexander, and then the Greeks introduced philosophy to the whole idea. And then Aristotle, Plato, all those guys had a huge influence on alchemy as well. So it thrived from about 200 BC to 600 AD. So for 800 years, people were loving alchemy. They were having a great time with it. And then, by about 600 AD, it was time for it to go away again. And so alchemy comes and goes constantly. One of the things that I think is interesting about it today is that it's coming back into the zeitgeist all the time. It's also like the word quantum. You know how the self-help influencers and they put quantum in front of everything. Everyone now is using alchemy in front of everything. It's the alchemy of this or that. Make sure you
Oh yeah.
alchemize. Have you alchemized? Like you need to take these and alchemize them. Anyway,
Oh, that's interesting. So yeah, so the word is back in currency
it's
again.
pop. It's hip. And
Yeah.
so then it goes away around 600 AD, and then it becomes basically a metaphor for Christianity. So the Philosopher's Stone represented Jesus, but as
Yeah.
an actual practice, as an esoteric tradition, it had basically gone away. And then, more war, Pete.
Hmm. Yeah.
Muslim conquest of the Middle East. Remember this one? They conquered the Byzantine Empire, took Egypt and Syria and a bunch of other places. I don't know if you remember that.
Yeah. Dimly.
I don't.
Yeah.
Dimly. They discovered the Greek alchemical texts and then translated them into Arabic, and then bam, it was back in session. So um, they I guess, do I have my numbers right there? But anyway, most of the Arabic texts are still untranslated. And then the work of Jung in the 20th century. Oh, and then the Middle East, or the medieval times is when they basically just thrive. That's when everyone knows alchemy, when they think of alchemy, and it's the people with the little things and the stoves and the little like accordion, little flute things, and then they have like stoves that have all of these different things. And so, um, and then some people thought they were charlatans, and then some people thought that they were just like devil people, and now they're wizards and they're in Harry Potter all the time. So 20th century, after the scientific revolution, again diminishes alchemy. So people go, no, thank you. Thank you so much for your service. You kind of had some good ideas. Um, but we're going to take it from here because that's a bunch of hooey. Then 20th century rolls around and it gains popularity once again via folks like Jung, okay? Because he gets this little book and he goes, oh, they're speaking in symbols. I get it. And then he starts looking at all the images. And what he tries to do is he tries to interpret the images using the same way he would interpret a dream. So he looks at alchemy as the same way you would look at a dream, with amplification, and he connects it to all these mythological things. He sees all of these archetypal symbolic images and the the what's it called, the Ouroboros, the
Oh yeah.
kind of
Yep.
mercurial serpent eating itself, death and rebirth, and all this stuff. Also, let's see, implication. Freud and the psychoanalytic crowd took a bunch of terms from alchemy as well. So things like sublimation, condensation, and those things were all part of the uh, the originally alchemical terms.
Yeah.
What do you think so far? Is this interesting to you?
Yeah, absolutely. I have learned many things, and as I'm listening to you, like I'm thinking, of course, it makes sense. You're looking at around the world, and things change. Trees come out of seeds, and as I say, water can be
Yeah.
steam or ice. So, like, it makes sense that in a very before we get to metaphor, before we get to kind of the symbolic dimension of it, the idea that things change shape and form, and things like a caterpillar can become a butterfly, you naturally would think these material things can change their substance. And as
Yes.
you say, you've got the religious notion of the transfiguration, where the bread and the wine
Yep.
become the body and blood. Although technically that's different because they don't physically become.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, you can kind of see how this notion, as a pre-scientific notion, kind of can lead to chemistry, where you start to learn that you can manipulate uh,
Yes.
chemicals and make them into something else, make poisons into potions, et cetera, et cetera. And then eventually, I guess, we will be able to have those things that you see in Star Trek, where you can hypothetically completely change something if you know the atomic uh,
Yeah.
shape or structure of something, and you can actually change that. I guess, is that alchemy uh,
Yeah,
becoming
I guess
realized?
their original thing was like they wanted to speed up the processes of nature. They wanted to
Uh-huh.
take what nature was doing and say, well, we can make this happen a little faster. And they know that something in the ground becomes something else. So why can't we do that? Like have it happen on a control it basically.
Yeah.
And they would look at something like spring, and they like, oh, they know that they knew it at that point back in the day, some of what we know now regarding the spinning of the planet and everything and how seasons happen, but they also still thought there was a goddess involved. And so the you if you can make some kind of contact with that goddess, then you can also rejuvenate, you can also become alive again. And so there's also this like lack of the science stuff of the empirical distance that scientists have now is not what they had. They were very much like they were trying to redeem themselves and redeem the lead. It was all connected in their minds.
Yeah. I mean, there is definitely a question of whether science can cash the checks that mythology and these proto-scientists and were writing. So,
Yeah.
when we talk about kind of youth, prolonging youth, there is a good chance that, if we don't destroy ourselves in the next 50 or 100 years, we might be able to prolong our youth, not
Yeah.
through connection with a goddess, but through understanding how cells uh, get old, and how they can't remember how it works, but some little tiny bit of them keeps getting lost. And if we can just fix that,
Yep.
potentially we can cure old age. So yeah, an alchemy, the idea that actually, yeah, we might be able to change materials more quickly. Like we all know that inorganic matter becomes oil over a long enough period of time, and
Right.
so science can speed these things up. Um, so there is a sense in which you could look at all of these proto sciences as ways of actually showing what reason and technology can actually do, can actually achieve.
Nice. That's nice.
Yeah.
I like that. That's a good take.
Yeah.
Um,
Even including flying and stuff like that, and communication over distances. I mean, in the old days, it might have been a spell that would allow you to communicate to the other side of the world. Now we have
yes.
mobile phones. So, all of these technologies were predicted um, just long before they could become a reality.
It reminds me of, if you're watching our on the youtube.com/Elliott Morgan, folks, I apologize for my camera. I'm trying so hard to make it not look like I'm drowning in sunlight right now, but whatever, it's beautiful. Uh, I know I was thinking about that with the cell phone. It's like we all have these little magic wands in our hands, and I was thinking about it in connection with just how much dumber everyone's getting, like brazenly dumber and very overly confident, but still dumb. And like, yeah, that seems like a natural thing if you have one of the most powerful devices that are maybe the most powerful device that so many people have with you all the time. Were
Yeah,
you referring to biohacking earlier? Were we talking about that last time? Like the
I think we did.
regenerating your organs so that you can live forever.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, we're obviously closer to that than we ever have been. But as you were saying last week, there are there are people who are actively attempting to get there within our lifetime. I mean, I'm skeptical we'll get there within 20 or 30 years, but my goodness, there's people spending billions
Yes,
trying to get there. Yeah.
I have a funny story about that offline, by the way, which we can
Okay.
talk about later. I don't think I've told you, and it's very funny. I think you'll get a
Oh,
kick out of
brilliant.
it. So yes, you have Alchemy. They're trying to speed up all this stuff. And then it lives on kind of as a metaphorical language, and that's how we have it today. I like to think of it as you know something more than the sum of its parts, something that pops off, that's irrational, that it's an experience more than a process, I guess, so that you can like hammer down. But I also want to go into the actual stages, and this is where it gets really confusing. Do
Oh,
you
yeah.
this Are you interested in this?
Yeah, I know vaguely like isn't there three stages of alchemy, but you tell me, you go through it.
Yeah, there's a few stages, and then some people include other stages and some people don't,
Okay.
but um there's like four main ones, and they are the yeah, Negredo, Albedo, Citrinatus, Rubedo, and then Conjunctio.
Okay.
So Jung's writing on alchemy is, I find, um we can't really understand anything that he's saying for the most part, and I don't really understand. It's like it's I would say probably as harder material, like Mysterium Conjunctionis is a very difficult read, but when you see the kind of summaries of them, they're almost too simple, so it's like a it's interesting, but I'm curious what your thoughts are on this. So first you have this Negredo stage, which is known as the blackening. These are all connected with colors, and they're all connected with myths, and they all connect to one another, and they all appear in different orders. So you can begin with any stage, and you can begin usually with the what's called the prima materia, Pete. So we're going to talk about the prima materia here because I think this part's really interesting. But before that, the prima materia is either the beginning of the stage or it's the end of the stage. It's the primary material, and it's the shit. It's the muck. It is all, and again, this is all metaphorical. So you're going through something and it feels like absolute just trash. You feel everything's falling apart. Everything is terrible. You've lost you're heartbroken. You got no money. You got no love in your life. You don't have a Christmas. You don't even have a Samsung frame. You have nothing going for you. You don't have turtlenecks and you don't have Christmas trees. You don't have hue lights. It's disgusting. Uh, and that's, you have to begin there. You have to begin basically in the chaos. All right. So you can see a
Mhm.
cosmological kind of thing here. And then it goes to the albedo or the whitening. I think of this as the cocaine stage, which basically means you take this shit, this muck, and you burn it for a while. So you're burning in you're taking all the gunk, and you do it until it crystallizes and it whitens. And that basically is, let's see, the emergence of consciousness and self-awareness. So you're able to become aware of yourself. It's also symbolized, my understanding is, in a kind of in the imagery, like you'll see the king or something like fly up and look down, and it's sort of symbolic of the, like, you're able to see yourself. You're able to go like, okay, I don't feel so completely lost in the chaos right now. I'm still like me, and I'm going to be all right. Then there's citrinatus, all right, and this is the yellowing stage or the golden transformation, and it symbolizes the integration of opposites and the emergence of a new balanced state. Jung, I think, would have an aneurysm if he didn't mention opposites uh, at some point in everything that he ever did. But we're going to also talk some of the critiques of this in a little bit from Hillman, which are kind of fun. So the citrinatus, you have this the integration of the opposites, the emergence of a new balanced state, and this is more like your personality is starting to feel like a real person. You're not just aware of yourself, you're integrating and basically this is a metaphor for individuation, back to this sort of idea that you can throughout your life, either unconsciously or consciously, your consciousness and unconscious will eventually start to communicate in some way or associate or better connect and be on better terms. And then there's the rubedo, or the reddening. And this is the final stage. It's marked by a reddening or appearance of the philosopher's stone, which signifies the ultimate goal, often associated with spiritual enlightenment and transformation of base materials into gold. Psychologically, it's the culmination of the individuation process, where the individual achieves a higher level of consciousness, self-realization, and a sense of wholeness. This is like, you're thriving. You have the Samsung frame. The shit has been worked out. The opposites have been integrated, and you're feeling great. Finally, there is the conjunctio, or the union, and that is the final union of the opposites. And then all of this stuff begins again. So when you go through the alchemical imagery, you have this, like, the king, who is symbolic of the sort of ego consciousness. King will be killed or will drown in the Primum materia, the massa confusa, and then will be transformed. It might be eaten by a lion, or the lion might eat the king, and the king might eat the lion. Who knows? And then eventually they transform again, and it all starts over again. So it never quite ends, as some
So
might think.
yeah, can you just, sorry, the last two stages sounded the same to me. Can you just outline the
I
difference
think this
there?
is wrong. I don't think I think conjunctio is just the stage of the opposites. My understanding is it ends with basically rubedo.
Okay.
That's a mistake on my part.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, this is so in a nutshell, you stage one, chaos, disorder. We could talk about the id. We could talk about the kind of pure explosion of base emotions and animalistic
Yeah.
urges. And then the second stage is kind of like the distilling of maybe consciousness and unconscious, this distilling of these opposites, the purification, like a separation, like the pure, like heating up a material, and the pure stuff goes
Yes.
to the surface. And then the kind of the dark stuff is there. And then the next stage is the kind of the integration of those two in the
Yep.
subject, the bringing together, the integrating of those two. And then
Id superego. Was that, would you say that?
yeah, I guess so. That could be one way of looking at it. So the ego kind of like brings together the id, the superego, or brings together conscious, unconscious, masculine, feminine. I'm using Jungian in terms of it. Yeah. So the bringing together of opposites to be able to kind of
Yeah.
integrate those. And then, sorry, the last stage really is it kind of connecting with the kind of spiritual, the transcendental,
Yeah.
or is there, yeah, or
Yeah, the if you think of the beginning being the muck and the dirt and the ground and matter, then the final stage you are basically the spirit. So you will then, it's the kind of the spirit soul distinction of spirit is flying high above and able to look down and be like, okay, I've done it. I've transcended all of this. I have my crystals and I have my inner peace, and there's nothing anybody can do about it. And then it goes back into the prima materia, muck, soul,
yes,
gross stuff.
can keep moving. Yeah. So, obviously I'm going to have a few issues with this story, but before we get into those, but like there's something quite intuitively kind of interesting or true about it. So that idea
Yeah,
that we start off like, you know, with chaos, and then we kind of this is percolated out into conscious and unconscious, and the work of, as you, the Jungian term, as you mentioned, individuation, which is in Jungian terms becoming your authentic true self and not being kind of tossed by the waves of culture and society, and integrating your
correct.
persona and yourself and all of that stuff, and, you know, coming to, I suppose, countersign your own desires.
And
And
it
then, yeah.
mirrors the individuation process of when you do that, then you do go back into culture once you've distanced
Mhm.
yourself from the effects of the society, similar to how once you reach the rubedo, then it again goes back into the negredo.
Yeah, yes. And I
So
wonder if
sorry, what were
that's
you saying?
then, yeah, no, no, that makes sense. And I wonder whether that, whether you would describe that as connecting with the deeper, what, you know, the Jungian collective unconscious, which is a sense in which you are connecting with everybody
Nice.
else. So kind of like you kind of move to that. So that,
Yeah, maybe.
yeah,
I didn't think about it that way, but I like that. That's fun.
yeah. Now,
You're a good Jungian, Pete. I don't know. I mean, you got it's remarkable.
yeah, yeah.
Now what I because I'm a Hillman fan, or have been
Mhm.
at least for the past month, and or a real kick with him. And one of the things now, and I'm curious if this connects to any of your notes or thoughts or criticisms, because I feel like I'm going to feel basically the same way, which is that this is a really good metaphor, but like all metaphors, I don't think it's necessarily you know unflawed. But Hillman's critique is that basically there's two major readings of alchemy. One is the science reading, it's a proto-chemistry, confused chemistry, and then there is what he calls the ascensionist reading, which is this sort of idea that like it talks about the even just the kind of colors and like the, well, it's better to be white than black, and then it's better to be yellow than white, and then it's better to be this, and there's this hierarchical thing that you can get to, and it diminishes the different stages. And Hillman is like, no, I disagree with that entirely. Basically, he's like, you can be going up or down, you could be going from any stage to any stage. And the metaphor he uses is that the alchemists, like, we read about it as these distinct stages, but even if you go into the images and you go into the way that their stoves worked, they were like they had different little spots for all of the things. Like one part of the stove might be doing a kind of sublimation condensation thing or whatever, and then another part's boiling something, and then the other part the steam is coming. So there's all these doors and everything, and basically he was using that as a metaphor to show it's not about being on some like path toward enlightenment, it's about recognizing where you are. Um and and kind of he calls it the sensuous fantastic, because you have all these lions and salamanders, and like there's like the king and queen in a hot tub at one point, and there's snakes and there's hermaphrodites, and it's like image wise it gives you basically fantasy material to better flesh out or differentiate what you're experiencing psychologically. It allows you to go, oh, this is like that, okay, great, and it gives you a sense of I guess wherewithal with where you're at, if that makes any sense. Does that make any sense to you?
Okay. Yeah, yeah. So yeah, to put it in my words, and so yeah, he's like, yeah, he's kind of like critiquing the developmental uh dimension of this, which actually, yes, I, you know, in a different way, like Lacan, in a way, critiques a little bit of this developmental notion of the subject, where we develop through stages that are, you know,
Yeah.
increasing complexity. And, you know, obviously the kind of, I guess the popular version of that is what do you call it, everyone's into it, integral thinking. um is
Yeah,
it integral thinking and all of that? So yeah, that's interesting.
it
That it's
reminds
not
me
so.
too. Oh,
Okay.
sorry, guy.
Oh no, jump on.
The theory of the evolution of consciousness, that like everything we're doing is on this like grand path toward like panentheism, the universe kind of evolving, and we are the universe seeing itself, but the evolution of consciousness has this like idea in it that everything behind us was stupid and like we are so brilliant basically.
Mm.
But
Yeah,
you would kind
yeah.
of follow that. Do you like the evolution of consciousness thing? I was hearing some
So
critiques about it. I like reading about it, but then I hear the critique, I'm like, that's a good critique.
yeah, yeah. Like so broadly speaking, I do think that it's interesting because yeah, I kind of am critical of the idea that we're progressing in terms of the short term dimension of history, as in kind of the last lot of thousands of years. We're definitely progressing technologically, but in terms of whether Plato is was dumber than people today, I would question that. But I guess I do think that there is a ongoing development of within the history of the cosmos that gets to kind of more and more complex forms. Um, and so, yeah, I don't mind hierarchical structures. So it
Yeah.
depends which one we're talking about.
As long as I'm on top, I don't mind them
Yeah.
at all. And the note Hillman makes about alchemy basically is that it's non-personalistic, so that the value of it is that when you are in this state of confusion psychologically and you are struggling, or say you are a patient and you're coming into like a therapist's office, you're coming in with the uh, all of this garbage stuff about your job or whatnot, and knowing alchemy or looking at the images basically makes you realize it's not that subjective, that there are things that you can almost objectify. I think Hillman says that it's nature getting personified and persons getting objectified. And so nature all of a sudden has a personality. People all of a sudden are what they're feeling is not always just their fault. It's not always their like duty to heroically conquer it. They're part of a stage basically.
Oh,
um
that's interesting. Because yeah, because if alchemy, again from a Jungian perspective, if alchemy is a kind of bringing together of opposites, and mind and matter are one of the ultimate kind of like di- dichotomies, um, and the way of unifying mind and matter is from potentially Hillman's perspective, to see that mind is in matter and matter is in mind. Um, and that's not a million miles away from Hegel. That, like, in a way, mind and matter seem like opposites. But as you said, how did Hellman say it? Is it, but the person is an object and the object is a person, which in
yeah,
Hegelian terms is the subject is a substance and the substance is a subject. And
nice.
that's interesting. So, yeah.
Now, I like the prima materia stuff. I like sticking with one of the terms rather than jumping around to the stages on that, because also it's more, it's as far as I got. But there's different kinds of primary material with which you can begin the alchemical process. And one of them is called the limus microcosmos, which Jung called the slime of the small world. And so basically, he's like, when people come into therapy and they're complaining about office gossip or something, that's like the slime of the small world. And the therapist will go, just get to the important stuff. Like, let's talk about, your relationship with your parents, or let's talk about, your inner your dreams or something. And he's like, no, that's wrong. He's like, the slime of the small world is very important, because beneath the slime of the small world is what he says are the five to seven impossible problems of life, which are money, relationships, family, sex, death, and society. And so basically the prima materia is the important stuff is in the small stuff too. Basically, it's not just in the like grandiose moments of your life.
Yes.
And then there's,
Yeah. Oh, I
please.
comment on that because that's great. That's a great point. And that is, central in psychoanalysis, which is the talking cure, is that when the reason why the analyst, as you know, but doesn't kind of like just starts wherever you want to start, doesn't even often say
Yeah.
hello, doesn't say, is that the most inconsequential thought that comes to mind is a thought that can be unpicked and expanded upon and will will
Yep.
unfold and unfurl itself in a type of revelation. And so, and what's funny is people often think about, or they want to say important things. I want to go in and I want, I don't want to talk about the slime, the small world. That's a beautiful term. I don't want to talk about that. I want to get right to the heart of things. I want to talk about what does a sexual fantasy mean? What does a symptom
Yeah.
mean? What is it? And that's good, because those things can also be obviously very insightful. But this idea is actually the most inconsequential thought that you have, or the most inconsequential dream that you have, that
Yep.
might even be a fragment of a dream, just one image that comes from that dream, um, is precisely what can open up to this rich world. So yeah, that's a, I could say, kind of almost like a basic insight of analysis.
Yeah, I can't tell you how many times I'll say something and I'll have not a lot to talk about in therapy, and then I'll just keep talking. I'll just, and it's like it kind of like I'm doing at parts of this podcast, but like then I'll, at the end of it, I'll go, wait, what did I say? Like who was that? Like that was a different I don't even know if I believe what I just said. It just like comes out and then it sparks some kind of conversation. But it starts to feel like a boring session becomes very interesting just
Mm-hmm.
by, yeah, it's like a talking chair, you could almost say.
Yeah, yeah. Sorry,
Then
you were
there's
going to go on.
Abyssos.
I'll probably stop you every now and again and kind of jump
Please.
in. So keep going.
Yeah, we don't have much longer on this, folks, and I know you're riveted.
Yeah.
Um, Abyssos, the term often associated with the abyss in alchemical and philosophical context. Um, so this is where you get into abyss of the heart, the hollow place in the heart you don't want to go near, is how Hillman refers to it. And so that's when the small stuff, you can kind of go, okay, what was this? It's like you can read backwards, read the person backwards as the therapist, and go like, okay, here's someone who is clearly an important person, and um, you can get the idea that they are almost above what they're talking about, that they're too much, they're too important for this kind of thing, but they're not willing to dive into it, basically. So they're talking about, and that, like that shame that you're feeling of the or you're talking about, of going on, oh, I need to talk about something important. um Not doing that is, I guess, also considered the abyss, like not allowing yourself to go. I don't know, this part's, I got a little confused there.
Well, can I say something on that as well? I don't know if this connects or not,
Please
but
do.
another, central notion in psychoanalytic theory is what is not said. Uh, so there's what is said, and there's also what is
Yes.
not said.
Heck
And
yeah.
yes, and the abyss, and one example, a very famous Freudian example, Freud couldn't remember the name of this artist, Signorelli or somebody. He couldn't remember, and he was trying to remember the name and couldn't remember it. So this not remembering, this silence, this inability to remember,
Yeah.
and other words, was incredibly important and led to a kind of access to a dimension of the unconscious. So in a way, the abyss of silence, the abyss of nothing, is even more so the analyst is listening not to what you say, but what is unsaid in your speech.
That is exactly it. It's the yeah, because he talks about how the primary material is always that which you are unaware of. And so the person talking about the small stuff, who you can tell is maybe above the small stuff, is ignoring like there's something in the absence, I guess, of
Yes.
what they're saying, that allows you
And
to go,
yeah,
okay, something's going on here. And he goes, maybe this person is afraid of falling into that, but that also means they're being afraid to fall means you might also be perched at a very high place or something like that. It was a nice
yeah.
sentiment.
And Lacan, he talks about in his first seminar that the point where silence is erupting resistance, what's called resistance, where the subject is having resistance, at the height of resistance, transference happens. So what happens is when you can't remember something, or something is not able to be seen, there's just an abyss, a complete, you feel like you're hitting a wall. Often what happens in the analytic session is what you cannot remember is projected onto the other, and you see it as coming from them. And I've got one good example of this with you. Actually, we've talked about it I think it was a couple of years ago, but I had a dream and I told you about the dream. And the dream made no sense to me. I couldn't access the meaning of the dream. And I went to the bathroom, and when I came back, you had a smile on your face, like a knowing smile. And I immediately said, I know what you're thinking about. You're thinking the dream means X, Y, and Z. And then you said to me, oh no, I was just thinking of something funny, right? But I projected this knowledge onto you because I couldn't get access myself, and so the transference erupted
Yeah.
whenever as a result, and you
Oh, I
helped me.
get it.
But you were like, no, I'm just dumb. I'm just thinking about some
No,
funny joke.
dude, I forgot you were here. I didn't. That's really great. Yeah, I really
Yeah.
thought you were gonna bust out with me having some good interpretation, but I like that one even better.
I'm still waiting. I'm still waiting for that.
Yeah. Oh no, I'm thinking about it, man. I'm wrapped up. Uh, so you have the abyssos, limos, microcosmos, and then you have this idea of kinnis or carbo or arbo, or otherwise known as ashes, coal, shadow, pitch, lead. This is other types of prima materia. And the metaphorical thing here that Hillman brings in is the venom. And the venom in alchemy is what kills or poisons the king, king being symbolic of ego or heroic consciousness. Hillman doesn't get into the ego stuff very much, but he keeps it in the fantasy terms. And so he says things like the hatred for one's own father, or that venom that you have toward your spouse when you're in the middle of an argument. That is what is necessary to puncture or to stab or to deflate the thing that you're up against. And so it's scorpionic, waspish, and it comes out in our little arguments with one another, and so that you're such that your talk has venom in it, it's got vitriol in it, and the poison is literally meant to shake the other person. Like if you freak out, if I get into an argument with my wife, which never happens, or if she gets mad at me, which never happens, there might be a moment where we both flip into being too angry, too like hey, you didn't need to go that far. And very often it's because we're trying to essentially burst some kind of bubble, like shake the person out of their singular non-differentiated mode of consciousness.
Yes. Can I say something about that as well? And I'm
Hop in.
thinking an overused term today, but it does have significance, is the word trigger. Because we use this word trigger, but that comes from a psychological
Mm-hmm.
place, which is that there's something is said that actually is not a big deal for most people. It seems quite normal, but you react in an incredibly abrupt and even abusive way. We do experience these eruptions within ourselves of a response to something that is if other people are going like you overreacted, for me that
Yeah.
is usually a sign that what you did is a type of uh, eruption of and a repetition of some sort of trauma.
Nice. Yeah. That's kind of I guess the general idea about this stuff is that it like what you're doing is with that, I think, is imagining or different parts of the way you respond, different parts of the psyche or different parts of your psychology, uh, so that it gives you, I guess, a different way to look at it. I guess is the value would be my like. I mean, there's I'm sure so much more, but because people love this stuff, and I go back and forth on it, and I think it's interesting, but then I kind of fall out of it. But yeah, I like the eruption, or like the repetitive pattern. Is that what you said too? Because I mean, that sounds archetypal as well.
Oh yeah, if it didn't, that I think you're seeing that you're bringing up it. Yeah, repetition is very key on that. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and then the pitch. So the pitch is like the gunk or the mildew or the misery, as Hillman refers to it. And that sort of sticks to everything, and it's gross. Again, this is prima materia. So this is what you begin with. You have to begin with the crap. And this is all the different kinds of crap. It comes out in complaining about office chatter. It comes out in, screaming at your partner. And it comes out in uh, the stuff of everyday life, basically. The slime of the small world. Um, and then there's Locke Viginus. This one's great, Pete. This one's
What was
fun.
the
This is
last
one
one
of my
you did? Sorry, did you just do one
oh
there?
pitch.
Pitch. What's
Pitch, I
pitch?
guess. Pitch is just the misery. It's the misery that seems to stick to everything. That you get a little sad, it spreads, it's all over the place. One like you're doing, you get a little misery, and everything becomes a little sucky.
So, okay, so just for me to recap, and then we'll get to four. So, if I'm reading this right, because say it's is that Jung is kind of saying, so there's one, the slime of the small world can be the little inconsequential arguments you have with your sibling or little things. So the inconsequential material that you
Yep.
start with that, or the poisonous dimensions where you erupt for
Yep.
no reason, the triggering, that's the venomous, that's a second kind of raw base material.
Uh,
The third, oh,
Abyssos as well. That kind
abyssus.
of absence, or the fear of falling, or the you're standing up, you know, there's emptiness.
Oh yes, yes, I forgot that one. So that's number two. So number one, the small things, which actually is the kind of inconsequential material that's valuable. The second, the abyssal, the silence, the thing that you do not say that is actually incredibly important. The third, the is the triggering, that where you venomously,
Mm-hmm.
violently respond to something that seems inconsequential. The fourth, depression, melancholy, that general kind of
Mm-hmm.
malaise that you might have. Okay,
Yep.
I'm following this. This is good. Okay,
It's
keep
fun.
going. Number
Uh, this I think is the final one that I have. Like, there's definitely, oh, there's two more, but this one is my favorite. Loch Guinness, or Virgin's Milk, and this is the symbolic representation of a pure and essential substance associated with the prima materia. It is, which is the prime or first material from which all things believed to originate in alchemical philosophy. But this is, I think of the meme with Fred Armisen where he's wearing a big sweater and he goes, "I'm just a little baby. I don't have any money. I'm just a little baby." Who, me? You know that meme? Have you seen that?
I haven't seen that. Oh no.
Man, telling someone about a meme that they haven't seen is just
I know
never
it
goes
does.
well. But
Yeah.
it's a very funny thing. We go, "I'm a little baby." It's the person who just goes, "Well, I didn't know. I just showed up. I just got here. I'm just a little. You can't get mad at me. Like I'm a little brother, and so I have plenty of times in growing up been like, well, I just, you can't get mad. I don't mean it no harm to anybody." And that's the Loch Viginus, or Virgin milk. It's an annoying
Okay.
kind of innocence that is it's not a poison. It's just that people, they don't know anything. They're just like
Yeah.
a aloof moron, and I like that one a lot.
Yes. And
They're
would that
sustained by
include?
innocence.
Yeah. Would that include? That because that might include passivity, a kind of like a type of childlike infantile passivity of not seeing yourself as
Yes.
actively involved, but a passive kind of victim of
Yes.
life. And so victimhood and passivity and what Hegel called beautiful soul. Okay, that's good. Yes, I
Yeah,
think
yeah,
if
beautiful soul
that
thing.
fits.
Yeah.
Yep, yep, yep.
And Hillman talks about how for Socrates, not knowing is the worst. So there's just sort of this like, uh, we have an addiction to innocence. Some would say oftentimes the American culture is very addicted to innocence. Like, we're very much like, we're a little we're a little old us.
Mm,
And that is also a starting place for the actual processes of transformation to begin.
mm. Very good. Was there a final one, or is that's the final one?
This is the last one.
Yeah.
All right. And this
Okay.
is just prima materia. There's a bunch of others, I'm sure. There's massa confusa, which is a confused mass. Something is just a big, you feel you're confused about the whatever. These also, some of um they're not hard and
Discreet.
fast.
Yeah,
Distinct, thank
yeah,
you. Yeah, discrete.
yeah.
And then Mons Niger, which is the Black Mountain. Um, and that is used to represent the stage of darkness and decay. It signifies the beginning of the journey, as these things do.
Mhm.
And that's all I got. I didn't write too much on that.
Yeah, say the darkness, the beginning of the journey. That
That's kind of, yeah,
yeah,
that was a
yeah.
summary of this is all prima material, all the
Okay.
beginning stuff. Or you end with
Yeah.
it.
Okay, so if I'm getting you right on this, what you've just outlined is in terms of analytical psychology, um, these are the base materials that the analyst works with, that the analyzer brings into the clinic. They might bring in something that they can't remember. So they have childhood amnesia where they can't remember very much about their childhood. I suffer from that actually, as an aside.
Really?
Yeah. Uh, Usually not a great thing, but as a side point. So, but uh,
It's
but an
abyssos.
abyss, so that's abyssos, or that a person is caught up always in just talking gibberish. They can't, whether they'll just sit and they'll talk nonsense about, oh, and then such and such said, and then such and such self, and then this happened, or depression and melancholy. So what if I'm here, you write, it's quite it's a nice way of saying, like, this is what the analysand brings to the clinic, and this is the stuff that
Yeah,
you're going to make something beautiful from. You're going to discover stuff from this primal material. And ultimately, I guess, from a Jungian perspective, and this is where I might offer one critique, whatever, but to be able to integrate, synthesize, and
sure.
find some sort of balance and ultimately sublimate.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and there is, my understanding is all of these different kinds when you get into the metaphorical processes or the actual processes of alchemy, I guess, but with these metaphors, that means that an abyssos or the limus microcosmos might have different, there might be a different thing, there might be something that needs to be heated up, there might be something that needs to be stripped away and taken apart, there might be like there's a different process for different types of prima materia that can allow the analyst to go, well, let's go this direction with the conversation, and I'm not gonna, or I'm gonna back away and just let this rest and not touch it for a while, and
Yeah.
so it can give almost a roadmap for the therapy session.
Now, if I was to, yeah, that's very interesting. And if I was to translate that into uh, kind of the approach that I take, um, it's not going to fit exactly, but this is to start with, is within kind of Freudian Lacanian school, uh, and Klein, whatever. But there's an idea that you have to treat a neurotic, and we've talked about this before, different
Yeah,
from a psychotic, different from someone with autism or perversion. And you, and so, for example, the things you were talking about, the very first one, the idea of the slime of small, what was it?
slime of the small world.
The slime of the small world, that would fit quite neatly with the idea of neurosis, in insofar as a neurotic will tend to talk a lot
Yep.
about things like arguments and work and in their relationship, and things that kind of a slight that maybe happened to them in some sort of meeting or something like that. Whereas the abyss one could uh uh fit more of a psychosis potentially. So what I'm kind of going is, this Jungian kind of approach uh, is interesting because it is very important that you cannot treat everybody the same in
Yeah.
the analytic clinic. You can, like, if you treat a psychotic like a neurotic, there's going to be real problems.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, so for me, there's ultimately, there's maybe four structures, but I kind of like this. I like what's happening here.
It's
Yeah.
fun. It's pure,
Mhm.
it's fun, and it's as a final note, I guess, I thought was interesting, and I don't know if this is from Jung or not, but it's basically the idea that alchemy is, you can think of it as the same way or the opposite, I guess, as Christianity is designed to resurrect, what is it? It's like Christianity, you're the divine is saving the matter, the heavenly father is saving
Mhm.
us, and then with alchemy it is reversed, and this is
Mhm.
that sort of as above so below thing where you're trying to get the sacred out of the material, or the sacred out of the ground, the yeah, so it's like
Yes.
resurrecting. We are the alchemists, we're trying to do what God did, and that's why I think maybe a lot of people didn't like him and they killed a lot of them.
Oh yeah. No, that's very interesting, because taking it out of alchemy for a second and putting it back in, is you have confessional Christianity, as you say, which is kind of mind or spirit, redeeming fallen matter. And then you have pagan, occultish, and maybe alchemist, they notions of base matter, uh, becoming spiritual, although those two are quite closely connected. But yeah, that makes sense. And then
Yeah, it's like one
yeah,
is the God is in the God needs to be saved, basically trying to
mm,
redeem God. Like the God in matter needs to be freed.
yes,
Is my understanding.
yeah, and then I guess yeah, that thing of like within matter, there is something spiritual and divine is an ascension, not a descending or
Yeah,
something. Okay, yeah,
and
yeah,
then
it's
I guess that's the whole point in yeah you're the matter the God in the sacred in the mat, and then you free the mat. I forget what I was going to say.
uh, well, here is my
Yes.
like, and like everyone will know, like I've talked about this ad infinitum, so I'll just kind of mention it briefly. But is that this alchemy, as it's kind of used in esoteric philosophies, and I think in kind of Jungian circles, does really enjoy notions of synthesis and balance and bringing together
Yes.
opposites to kind of to in and wholeness even, right? So wholeness, synthesis, balance are terms that are used in this type of philosophy that's uses alchemy, and that's the bit that I have the primary issue with,
Mm-hmm.
uh, only because I think that from an ontological perspective, from the very nature of reality, there is an inherent decentering, an inherent antagonism and contradiction that cannot be overcome through balance or synthesis or wholeness. Um, and
I'm
so,
curious.
and yeah, so that's kind of like that would be where I would signpost my differences.
Right. Mercurius, I think, is what's symbolized in that the kind of fluttering around. You can never get a hold of it. There's always something that's a little off. The snake, the serpent, Slytherin running
Yeah.
around. But yeah, I agree. I don't think that the traditional Jungian stuff is. We've talked about this.
Mm,
I'm on board with I don't like the harping on wholeness. I also think it can make people really obsessed with being whole all the time. But
mm,
I do think one can experience the feeling of wholeness, but ontologically, yeah, I don't think that there's going to be like a you're ever really going to feel that way. Which is what kind of what I like about the cyclical nature of alchemy, where it's like you do get this like transcendental stage and then it just goes like right back down or it skips all over and it's all chaos basically at some point.
yeah.
um and you can never stay for too long in any, but there is a constant transformation happening. That would be something that I would go with, but it's a feeling, I guess. It's the experience of it, not the. I don't know if anybody's going to walk out being like a guru or anything
Yeah.
ever.
And like the way I think of, because I'm sure some people might think, well, what is like what do you what does someone like me do with the idea of experiences in which sexually or spiritually one feels a profound sense of oceanic oneness or wholeness? What do I do with that? And the only thing I would say is that for me, it's precisely because everything is fractured that we have a even a fantasy or an idea of wholeness, and within that frame of fantasy, some material objects occasionally sit within it. And so we have these occasional moments when something seems to give us that, but it's almost like, you can never say the moment that you fell in love. You either weren't in love or you already were in love with the person and you just didn't know it. Right. So there's a sense in which, oh, I loved you. I just didn't know. So like, it's almost like love is never like, oh, there's the moment. You're either too soon or too late. Same with revolution. You can't name it. The revolution either hasn't happened or already has happened. And you're just kind of like verbalizing or symbolizing it. So in a similar way, I would say wholeness for me either kind of hasn't happened or just happened. And that's that's a very profound experience. But it's kind of like this fleeting uh it's this fleeting event that if we think we can grasp hold of, we end up in a world of trouble.
It's funny to hear you talk about this in front of Christmas trees. Um, yeah, I like that a lot. I also think those are two really good metaphors. The yeah, the falling in love, you never know right when. I mean, you know, maybe, but I get what you're saying, and that is very true. And it is always like you mythologize the everything, and it feels like fate, and it feels like all that stuff. But yeah, and unfortunately, it is every we all are all whole, Pete.
Yes. With an H. That's spelled with an H. Yeah.
Yes,
And
no
then
W.
and then you're fine. Then you're right.
Yep.
I
Yes,
finally won you for after all
you got
these
me.
years.
Oh, he was spelling it wrong.
Very
Uh,
good. Well, this was very enjoyable, man. I very much enjoyed this. Have you got a takeaway in terms of the alchemy then?
no, I'm gonna begin with what I started with, which was a bunch of shit. But I think it's fun for people to look into, and I can recommend the book Jung and the Alchemical Imagination. And I'm reading a book called from one of my professors called The Lion Ate the Man or something like that. And he gives a really personal story and then does it through the lens of alchemy, which helps kind of understand some of this stuff. But it's really interesting. It's fun. I think it's very fun. And then it also gets like almost the stages of alchemy where I go, oh, okay, and I won't care about it for 6 months, and then I'll start watching lectures, and I'll be like, oh, this is a fun way to think about things. Okay, cool. It's a different way of looking at the psyche that is imaginative and weird and interesting. And I also think it's good to know what it really is when it's being used for um to sell like health potions on Instagram.
Yes. Very good. And here I just enjoyed very much the this idea of the primal stuff that the person brings potentially
Have fun.
to the analytic
Yeah.
clinic. I thought that was very thoughtful, very insightful. So thank you for that. All right,
Slime of the
great.
small, and that's Hillman. Props to Hillman. All right, thanks everybody. Appreciate it, and we'll see you next week on the Fundamentalists.
Bye.